We are Calibrate Analytics. We were formed in the beginning of 2021. It was myself, two other gentlemen that I've worked with for the better part of 20 years. And really what we set out to do was, when we say we help organizations, organize and manage their data. But really it sort of tracks back to all the years we spent on the agency side where we were continually challenged with being pressured to, bring more data to the table, right? But it was always, prepared in a manual way. And so over the years, we learned to do that in a sort of a more efficient way. And then, beginning of 2021, we decided that we wanted to help others with that more broadly. So we formed Calibrate Analytics. We provide a variety of services that help organizations collect and organize their data. We also have a platform which I'll demo today. But then we also provide services and visualization apps, BigQuery, etc. So for our agenda today, we got through number one. We are going to talk about this sort of data studio project, right, or Looker Studio project, where we're going to take data from a source that isn't native to Looker Studio, and we're going to bring it into our dashboard. But before that, we wanted to do just a couple of quick polls. So the first one is, how many of you today are using Google BigQuery in your Google Analytics or Google data stack? Awesome. And then for our next one, we'd like to know if you're using a data management platform or ETL, which is an extract, transform, and load application, which is part of what we'll demo today. Awesome. Thank you guys for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the number 3 item here. Before I do that, I've got one more slide, and you guys know me, I don't like to, use slides that heavily, at least anymore. But essentially what we're going to do today, right, is I assume if you're interested in Looker Studio, you've got Looker Studio reports that you're using already. One thing to call out is that Looker and Looker Studio are two separate dashboarding applications that Google offers. Looker is their enterprise version. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, they rebranded Data Studio to Looker Studio to bring those kind of closer together. But they are separate. They work completely differently. They're not similar other than the fact that Google owns both of them. When we look at what we're going to set up today, part of the value of doing it this way is that you're, centralizing the data storage, but you're making it available to any dashboard application that has a BigQuery connector, right? Which for the most part, all of them do now. So while we're going to be using this one, which is one of the most common ones that you'll see, lots of organizations use Power BI, lots of organizations use Tableau, and you're seeing a lot of adoption of Google's other Looker product as well. And so that's one of the great things about centralizing your data in a database is that, you're not just kind of siloing it into one specific, application or use case. It becomes available to, use in lots of different applications. And so that's sort of the way that we've focused our product and the way that we, recommend doing this, especially if your needs are to scale what you're doing. You certainly have to have a data warehouse in place to be able to achieve any level of scale. So this is kind of how it's going to work, right? So we don't have a native integration in Looker Studio for MailChimp today, which is the source that we're going to bring into our report. And so we're going to use Launchpad to go to the MailChimp API, extract the data that we need, put it into our BigQuery, and then we're going to connect to the table in BigQuery using Looker Studio the same way that you would set up a connection that's directly to GA4, directly to Google Ads, or directly to any of those other sources that they offer. So with that, let's get out of slides and get into the actual doing of it. So this is our Looker Studio template. We like to design ours almost like a website, where we've organized the different, content, if you will, which is data, into its respective buckets from a marketing perspective. So when you think about holistic marketing, most of the time you're organizing that into your own tactics, earned tactics, paid tactics. And so that's what we've done here. But all of these links work, right? We've introduced sub-navigation for each of the sections. And so, the users of these dashboards can easily navigate to a specific tactic of their marketing plan, and without having to go through sort of that linear step of page to page to page to page to page, right? They can easily navigate, to and from different sections based on whatever it is they're interested in. This isn't paid Looker Studio. This is 100% free. We did approach this project like we would approach a sort of like a new website build, if you guys have ever done that before, where you hire a graphic designer to comp out what you want your dashboard to look like. That includes going out and collecting different assets like the icons that you see here, you'll see throughout. Really, thinking through the layout of that dashboard page and really what your overall data story is going to be. And then we take that comp and we give it to, one of our data scientists to go and build out as closely as possible to what the actual comp looks like in the dashboarding application that we're working with. I would say that Looker Studio, from that respect, probably has more ability than any other dashboarding application to really make it look like a professionally designed comp. And so that's what we've done here. But again, other than that, this is just the free version. There's nothing that we've done or paid for on top of that to achieve this level of UX or this level of look and feel. So you'll notice here that we do have Google Analytics, and this is the native integration using Looker Studio. So when you go to connect this, right, you would just use the add data and you would select Google Analytics, you would authenticate with your user, and then you would choose the property that you want to bring into Looker Studio. And then you could start to build charts and visualizations and set it up however it is you want to do that, right? But what you'll see is that we do have a lot of data here that isn't represented in Looker Studio from a native source connection, right? So email being one of them. I mentioned we're using MailChimp for ours, so we're going to connect to that data. But then also things like Google My Business. Google My Business has a wealth of information for yourselves and your customers if you have brick and mortar stores. And usually it's only the people that have access into Google My Business that are seeing this information, right? So a lot of engagement with your brand, your website, etc., is all happening now on GMB, and that story often goes untold, other than if you have your GMB listing tagged out, with UTM codes, so you can see that in your Google Analytics report. But by connecting to the GMB API, we can extract that data, and then we can surface all of this information, right? All of these calls and leads and things like that are, meaningful for your business, and put it in front of your stakeholders or, the other people that would, find that information useful. You'll also notice, throughout, is that we're adding visual cues to help the user understand where the source of data is coming from, right? So you see the logo here for GMB. Without this, you might think this is Google Ads. You might think it is even, Google Analytics. And so throughout each of these sections, you'll notice that we've sort of included the source, but we haven't, necessarily gone and typed it out, because that adds additional clutter. It just isn't as clean as we'd like to have it be. So this is one example, right, where we've already done this, where we've brought in, data from a source. It is Google, but they don't have a native Looker Studio connector for it, and brought this in a meaningful way. This updates every day, and so we'll show you how to do that with Launchpad, but we're going to show you with the MailChimp integration. So with that, let's get into setting up Launchpad. So the first thing that I need to do is log back into MailChimp. Let me do that off the recording. Okay, so here are our campaigns, and we've got some data here that's being shared. There's more detailed reports in MailChimp, but what we want to do is bring this into our dashboarding application. So I'm going to go under my account screen and I'm going to go to API keys, and I'm going to generate a new key. Whoop. And I'm going to copy this guy. So now I've got my API credential. In Launchpad, I'm going to go to data transfer. And then what I'm going to do first is, so we're going to set up a source. We're going to set up a destination, which typically you only set up your destination once unless you're working with multiple customers and they have multiple different data warehouses. But you will have continued new sources over time. I'm going to click on add source. And then from here, you can see all of the native API integrations that we've got on Launchpad today. MailChimp certainly being one of them, but I think there's about 35 to choose from. And then in addition to that, if we don't have a source that maybe you need Amazon, maybe you need, TikTok, maybe you need, something that we haven't added. If that platform offers the ability to email the data as a CSV file, you can just have it emailed to Launchpad, and then we'll take it and we'll write it to BigQuery. And then if it's also a source with an API, but we haven't added it yet, what we do is we evaluate it from a community perspective. So if it's something that's commonly used, like TikTok I mentioned, that would be one that would make it onto our roadmap. So we could start by transferring the data through CSV files, but then we would add it to the roadmap, and then we would give you sort of a projected date on when it'll be included in a future release. And that's how we sort of approach the product from the get-go. So it's sort of a progressive enhancement style product where we're continually adding new integrations, both from a source and a destination perspective, to bring more value to the community. If it's some obscure API that is being phased out or nobody's using, then it's probably not something that would make sense for a community platform, and we would look to do more of a a CSV file email or transfer like that. So going back to MailChimp, I'm going to click on add source, and then it's asking for my API token here, and then it wants the data center ID, which is at the end. So we're going to do, I'll do newsletter. So just like that, we've connected to the API, right? So no engineers, we don't need to work with anybody else from a technical perspective. The next step is we need to connect to our BigQuery, right? We need Launchpad to connect to BigQuery. And so similar to the source setup, we're going to click add destination. And then we've got all of these different destinations to choose from. We're using BigQuery, right? We are a BigQuery shop in terms of support. So the service that we provide is only in Google products from a data warehousing perspective. From a Launchpad perspective, we support all different destinations, right? So we've got AWS, we've got Azure, we've got Snowflake. You can see some of these sort of newer ones with the ChatGPT that we're working through or working on. So if you use Snowflake or you use Azure or a different data warehouse, certainly something that we can work with. And from a technology perspective, the demo today is using BigQuery, but again, from a tool perspective, we support all of these. So when you go to set this up in well, it's Google Cloud project, right? There is some stuff I'm not going to go through, right? But it is detailed out here. It's not hard. You go to the user setting, which is in the IAM section in BigQuery, right, or GCP, and you're going to add our tool service account. If you've not done this before, give it the required permissions, and then you would hit save, and then you would then do what I'm about to show you. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to put our cloud project ID here. And so that's going to be easiest found here, right? So you go to the dashboard, the main screen on the dashboard, our cloud project ID is Calibrate training. So I'm going to grab that. And that's going to take me to the next step, and it's going to ask me to select data sets. Data sets are kind of the equivalent of folders when you're thinking about the way that BigQuery is organized. And so you would need to create these, right? This is part of the BigQuery setup, but these are essentially the folders or data sets where you're going to store the corresponding tables, right? So for MailChimp, this would be the folder, and then within MailChimp, we have our data tables here. You click on them, and BigQuery does a great job of sort of showing it to you like you would see it on a spreadsheet. So laid out in table format. And then you will probably hear me talk about records. Records are just one row, right? When you're thinking about a spreadsheet or a table like this. So if we say 10 records, it's the first 10 records, right? Or 10 rows. So for today, we only need MailChimp. So I'm gonna select MailChimp. But if you're using Launchpad for multiple different data sets, you would select as many as you need. So I'll just grab a couple more. And then I'm gonna name this Calibrate training. The next is we're gonna select the storage bucket. The way the transfer works is we actually write a file to the Google Cloud Storage bucket, and then we use native Google Cloud functions to write the data to a BigQuery table. And so we have to have a cloud bucket that we're using as well. This is part of the overall just sort of GCP setup. It really doesn't take long, but as a part of like our onboarding process, we'll help you to get all of this stuff configured so it's working properly. Just from an initial setup perspective. And then from there, as I mentioned earlier, there really isn't much maintenance with your destination so long as it's not changing. All right. So now we've created our source, right? So we've got our MailChimp source. I mentioned there's some other non-native sources that we have here as well that we use to pull data from, but this will be the one that we're working with today. We have our destination, which is BigQuery. So now it's time to marry the two together. And the way that we do that is we come to our job configuration screen and we click on Add New Job. And so for this job, we're going to select MailChimp as our source, and we're going to select our Calibrate Training GCP project. The way that I like to name these, which is completely up to the user on how you would do that, but I like to start with my GCP project ID and then do my data set that I'm going to be using, and then finally the table name. And what this does is, 2 months down the road, when you're looking at a job and you don't know where it's writing data to, or trying to remember what you did, it makes it really easy to say, okay, this is this project, this data set, this table, right? So you know exactly where you're sending the data to just by looking at the main screen. So what I'm going to do is this is the first screen that we default to, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to the schema builder to show you guys this first, and then we'll circle back to the settings screen. So this is where you select the different dimensions and metrics that you want to get from your API. And so we're looking for data from the campaign report endpoint in this API. And so I'm going to expand that. And then I'm going to start choosing the different fields that I'm going to need to be able to visualize this properly. So I want campaign ID, I want campaign title, I want campaign subject line, maybe the preview text, and then I'm going to want some of these metrics. So I want hard bounces, soft bounces. Let's get total forwards. Let's get total opens, unique opens. And then finally, clicks and unique clicks. So this is what we're selecting from the API, specifically what we're asking it for. In theory, we could grab everything if you needed everything, and the API allows it. A lot of times that's overkill. It also increases the number of records that you're pushing through the system and loading into a table. So it really sort of depends on what you need and what you think you might need down the road. But I would say don't overdo it and automatically just try to go and get everything. Try to have a plan for the schema that you need that will ultimately be used in your visualization. So this is going to show me on this side the specifics of the table, right? So this is the table name that it's sort of defaulting to. But what I mentioned earlier is that I actually want this to be newsletter demo. And so I'm going to change this to newsletter demo. And it's pretty much ready to go in terms of the schema. There are some different things that we can do. So this is going to be the table heading that's written in the schema in BigQuery. If you don't like this or you want it to be something else, you could certainly inline edit it. So if you didn't want to have campaign title, you could just have it say campaign. That's certainly possible. But I'm not gonna really do a lot of that modification right now. And I'm going to switch back to the settings screen. So now this is all set. I actually want the full month of September. Actually, let's pull August and September. And so I'm going to save that. And now the last step to do for the initial setup is just to run the job. So we're going to run this job. And then what that's going to do is it's going to add a table here called newsletter demo that we can then use for our visualization. It does usually take, depending on the API and depending on how much data you're pulling, it can take time for those jobs to finish. And as we were preparing for this presentation, I told the team that I wanted this to sort of be like the cooking show or the cooking demonstration that you would see on YouTube or something like that, where I put the quiche in the oven and I hit go, and then I pull the one that I already did earlier out. So that's what this is just I had run this earlier, so in the interest of saving time. And so this is a table that we had already built. You can see the data here that's been transferred, and this is, I think, roughly a year's worth of data. It all aggregates to the campaign send date, so it's only about 12 records, which isn't very much in terms of a storage capacity. So it should be super fast when we go to visualize it. I'm not gonna really talk a ton about BigQuery today because I think the way that we've done this, it really lends to not having to know a ton about BigQuery. It certainly is something that I think everybody should continue to try to learn more about. But it's sort of like Google Sheets if you're using that as a source on steroids. It has much more scale, it's much faster, and we write the data in such a way where you don't really have to know SQL for basic tasks to be able to use BigQuery and take advantage of the speed and everything else, automation that you can get from it. So we're going to go over here and start to work in Looker Studio. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add data like you would if you're using one of the native connectors. But instead of using Google Analytics or one of these others, we're going to go to BigQuery. We're going to choose Calibrate Training. Excuse me. Our MailChimp data set. Oh, there's our table already, right? And then we're going to choose a MailChimp newsletter again, which is the one that I had done previously. And now from there, I'm going to go back to this email page that we're going to get started on. And I'm actually going to go over to the SEO page. And I like these 3 boxes here. So I'm just going to take these, do Control C, which is copy, and then come back to my email marketing page, and I'm just going to drop them right in. And now I'm going to go through and start updating. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to update away from the Search Console source, and we're going to bring in this MailChimp newsletter. And so it doesn't recognize the metric names, right? It couldn't make any connection there. So what we have to do is drag our new metric up. So we're going to put the total opens here. And then we want to show our deltas. Excuse me. And so it's going to be the same treatment for each of these charts. So it's not recognizing it again. We're going to pull this up. And now we've got the delta from last year. Same treatment. And we'll do total opens. There. Now I could change the icon. The way you do this is the way same way you would bring in any other image. With these icons, you want to go out and select images that have transparent background. They work much better. But it's, again, same thing, same practices going out finding icons for PowerPoint slides or anything like that. We'll do clicks. And here's my total clicks. Switched it from. Got that one right too. And then maybe, should we do for the last one? We could really do any of these. I'm going to do bounces, which I don't know if we had any, but at one. So that gets us sort of the base, call it the high level view, right? Those cards and charts. I mentioned earlier that we like to add a visual cue so the user can understand where the data is coming from. So I'm gonna grab this logo off the website, save to my desktop, come back here, and we're going to insert an image. Pictures of me. You could also go out and search for just the vendors. This is one that's been modified slightly by us. for a product perspective. But now the user can see exactly where this data is coming from, and you've added that bridge without having to have a big, bunch of text and whatnot included. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll just add maybe a table chart. And here we can list out our campaigns by maybe title. So let's do that. Email campaign title. I almost never show row numbers. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a fan. And then maybe we'll include the subject line as well. It's just one. For this date range, it's just one that we did in July. So and so we've got opens, and why don't we add clicks and bounces. So this doesn't read well. So we're going to do a little work on that. And I think we'll show a total. And so if we were sending out, or if you guys are sending out multiple email campaigns throughout the month, you would have them all listed here, and then you would have all the context next to them. If you do have some sort of conversion tracking associated with the system, and you've got that set up, so if you're tracking leads or bookings or purchases or whatever it is, you would be able to pull that information through as an additional metric and show that along with your campaign information. Again, it would have to be tracked and recorded in the system and available in the API, but if it is, then it's really straightforward to bring that information in. So this is how we would get that information into BigQuery and then ultimately into Looker Studio. There's one more step that you need to do in the ETL after you do your initial data load, right? So when you're initially loading data, you have to decide how much of a history you want. That could be a year, 2 years. It could be from the time you started, working with that platform, and it could also be, from whatever that platform allows. Some of them don't allow you to pull data past a specific point. And so with Launchpad, once you've done that initial archive or data load, you would then want this to refresh for you automatically, right? And so instead of using static date ranges, we're going to do, use a dynamic date range. Since this is an email campaign, what we like to do is refresh the records from campaigns for up to 30 days. You will find that the data changes for up to 30 days because people that haven't been in their email or are going through their email and hadn't looked at the email yet will open it not the day of, the day after, but up to 30 days later. And if you're not refreshing the data for those dates, what happens is your dashboard is out of sync with what we're showing in MailChimp or whatever you're using. And so this will go back and it'll look at the last 30 days and it'll rewrite those records using the most recent information. It is possible to set that refresh for even longer if you think that that's going to change on a different cadence than what I just suggested, but that's sort of the best practice. So first we would set this to a dynamic date range. So this is going to look at the last 30 days. And then instead of manual, right, we're going to set this to run once a day. And so I want this to run before I start working in the morning. So we're going to have this run at 5 a.m. And then the last thing to do is make this an active job. And we'll save it. And so now each day, this job is going to run, and it's going to look at the last 30 days. It's going to write the last 30 days of records to BigQuery and update that table. And then when you go in and log into Looker Studio and refresh that page, it's going to bring all of that new refreshed data into the dashboard. So you have it there, and hopefully you haven't done anything, right? So any manual effort with exporting, that data out of MailChimp, bringing it into either a Google Sheet or Excel or whatever you're doing, right? All of that would hopefully be taken care of, right, by this process.